Okay, so I'm coming back again to another portion of a memory about going to Catholic school. And at this point, going forward and saying this is about the 8th grade. So I'm getting ready to, quote, graduate from Catholic school. And the following year, I'm going to be going to high school. And so many of the students were having like parties to celebrate, graduation. And again, I am thinking of it from a very, good girl, goody two shoes perspective. I'm not thinking about it from a rebellious spirit perspective. I'm actually thinking about it like, oh, wow, there's some gifts that I would like to get, and some books I'd like to read. And it would be cool to have my girlfriends come over and maybe some boys that I'm friends with, and that's really what it was. And we'll have some cake and drink some juice and, and everything will be fine. And that's like really my kind of perspective on it. And so what happens is my parents agree to allow me to have this boy girl graduation party for 8th grade. And, it's like from like, I don't know, like it's still sunny outside and then like afternoon until the evening or something. And again, there was no alcohol involved. There were no drugs involved. There was no sex involved. There was none of that. That was not part of my agenda. That was not part of my party plan. None of that. It was cake and juice and opening up presents and being with my friends and playing games like Monopoly and Twister. And, it was very, very, very simple. So I'm at the party, my graduation party, and it was pretty much in the basement of our house. And then we had like a basement door that went out to the backyard and a side door from the basement that went out to the side in the backyard. And our backyard went into the woods. So there was like a stream behind our house with trees and stuff. And it was a very pretty backyard, and there was just a little shed in the yard, and we had a little bonfire. So like we're roasting marshmallows and having s'mores. I mean, like I said, it was very like simple. And then there's cake inside, and we had games inside. So there were some people staying inside playing games, and other people were outside, around the campfire, roasting marshmallows. And at some point, my parents were like pretty much out there, like monitoring this daytime and into evening. And then at one point they just kind of were like, okay, we're just going to let them have their time for a little bit. And so, we're in the basement and some of us are outside. And the next thing I know, again, this girl, Becky, is telling me, have one of these drinks. And I'm like I'm drinking, this vanilla Coke or whatever. Like I'm not into whatever it is that she's trying to get me to do. And I'm not trying to break any rules. And like I said, in my mindset, like I'm not trying to, spike the punch or sneak in beer and alcohol. Like that's just not part of my mindset at all. So next thing I know, I'm realizing that my party has been tampered with, and these boys are bringing in beer, and people have spiked my punch, and people are going outside and smoking, and people are like, physically hooking up and like kissing and whatever. And I'm just like, I'm sitting inside going, I'm not participating. You know what I mean? Like I'm just such a goody two shoes. I don't even understand. And I'm just like, well, I'm not participating. And so there's a bunch of us goody two shoes that we're just inside, like reading a book and playing a game and a board game and just content. We're not participating in whatever it is going on. But I should have stopped it, but I didn't understand that I really had the authority to do that at that time. I was just not like a step in your power. I was more of a wait and see kind of person at that point. And so the next thing I know, like, the next day, and some of these girls had stayed overnight for a sleepover, and at some point, some of the girls were trying to sneak outside. We're all in the basement in our sleeping bags, and some of the girls were like, I'm going to go outside. And I'm thinking, why are they going outside? But I'm just not thinking, oh, there's boys outside waiting for them. I just did not know. It's just too naive. So the next day, I get reprimanded by my parents, and my mom was like, Anne, come outside with me right now. And here's my mom, like, showing me used up condoms. I didn't even know what a condom was. And they were in our shed and behind the shed. And there's all these beer cans littered on the ground. And now I'm getting punished and I'm getting reprimanded for allowing this to happen. And I'm like, I didn't know this was going on. I don't even know what a condom is. You never talked about this with me. I don't know. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, we had not really ever talked about sex, or, you know what I mean? It was just, so the bottom line is I was clueless. And now I'm being reprimanded, and my mom is making all the girls who were still at the house before their parents come to pick them up to now going outside with trash bags and clean up the yard from all the trash that was thrown, and beer bottles and, beer cans and whatever other trash and paper plates. And so we're cleaning up everything. And these girls are like, I didn't do it. And like, nobody wants to admit who the person was. And then finally, it was like a girl that I knew from ballet. It was, I think her name was Christina or something. And she was the girl that ended up having sex with one of the guys, and she's the one with the condoms. And then she basically is like, it's not a big deal, and all of us are like, we think it's a big deal. Like, why would you do that? And again, I'm being perceived as like, oh, you goody two shoes, you're too good, and bottom line is I got, punished after that when all the girls, were picked up. Then I'm not allowed to ever have a party again, and I'm not allowed to have people over. And so, like, I always was the one that felt the consequences of whatever decisions that I made that were bad decisions. So again, I didn't want to keep making those decisions. And when things were found out, usually it was after the fact, like, because I just wasn't aware that these things were going on, because I'm not looking for it. I'm so involved with, having a Bible study or reading a book or, playing a game with people that's like to grow as a person or whatever, than participating in alcohol and drugs and sex. It just wasn't part of my desire, So long story short is, right after this, it was like not that far after that, within the following year, it was like where so many spiritual attacks came on me. And, I didn't really know all these other girls that I went to school with at Towson Catholic and from Sacred Heart. Like, I didn't really know what they were doing when they weren't hanging out with me. If I went shopping to the mall with them, or, went to the library with them to do a book report or something, like, that was the context of how I knew the person. And if we went out to Friendly's and got a sundae, and, that was the context. I didn't know them outside of that context. I didn't know that they were having sex with these boys. I didn't know that they were, doing drugs. I didn't know that they were participating in alcohol. I didn't know. And because I wasn't doing it, I didn't understand that this was something that people were doing. I just didn't get it. So bottom line is, the next thing I know, that was like the year that I started to really get attacked. And it was just, a lot of different circumstances. And at the time, I had a friend who was a skateboarder, and I was very active with riding bikes and skateboarding and doing like tomboy athletic things. That was like one part of my personality, physical fitness and walking and stuff like that, and going on treasure, like walk hunts and stuff like that in the woods. And then the other time, I'm in the ballet and dance studios, like, dancing and jumping and turning and spinning, like, it was like either I was being disciplined in dance world, or I was being disciplined in Catholic school, or I was being disciplined with my parents. And so in my play life, like, I still was not trying to go outside of the lines. I was still coloring within inside the lines, but other people in my teenage generation, they were already with a rebellious spirit. They had already crossed the lines, broken the rules. They were out of integrity. They were not under the authority of their parents. They were not under the authority of God. They were not under the authority of Christ. And they wanted to get me to do things with them that I didn't want to do. And so, therefore, one day I'm coming home from school and, I'm with my little brother and I get him a snack and we do our homework. And the bottom line is this guy, was that I knew from Reisterstown, and we're now living in the city, and he's like, on the same bus route or whatever. And he's like, your mom, so like my mom, we were moving from the county to the city. And so my mom was like, you need to like tell these people that you're not going to be around because we're going to have a different lifestyle now. And I'm not going to drive back and forth to all this. So you're going to have to let go of some of these friends. So there were some guys who were my friends that, we would go for a hike, or we would go fishing, or we would drive go-karts and ride bikes and, skateboard and do like guy things like that, like fitness, athletic type things. And some of these guys, like that was just like what we did, and it was like, so I'm the tomboyish girl in the group in the group of guys. And the bottom line is I'm not thinking that these guys want to do me any harm. They're not like trying to harm me, at least visually. I didn't appear that way. It was more like it was a competitive thing. Like, oh, can you do this? Oh, I can do this, And so it's like, it helped me to rise to a higher level of like, I can do that too. I'm a girl, but I can do that too. Right. And, so the next thing I know, I'm walking home from school with my brother. I see this guy that I used to know, in the county, and we live in the city now, and he's following us. So he's not a stranger to me. He's a friend to me. And so I invite him in the house with my brother, and we have cookies and we do our homework. And then I'm like, hey, come on upstairs in my room. And my brother's in his room. And the next thing I know, like, I'm being raped. And it wasn't something that I even understood what sex was. I didn't even know what that meant in terms of like how that even worked. I was just so naive, and I'm saying no, but my little brother couldn't hear because my bedroom was in the attic on a totally separate floor. And, the guy has his hand over my mouth. So, it's not like I can be heard. And when it's done, like, I'm just feeling like so used, and I don't like that feeling. And again, I don't even know how to respond because it wasn't something that I chose, and then he just leaves. And, eventually I don't get my period and I'm all upset, and, I'm like, what do I do? And it's like, do I go directly to my parents? And then I had a job. And so I go to this coworker and I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, you need to get a pregnancy test. And I'm like, what's that? How do you get it? You know what I mean? Like, I was just so clueless. I just did not know. And so I get the test and I take it and it's positive, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm at this premier dance school, and my body is my instrument, and I can't do this whole mom pregnancy baby thing. And at the same time I'm like, but you know I guess I'm gonna have to, like, I don't even know if there's other options. Do you get what I'm saying? I was just so naive, so young. And so this person's like, well, you could do this and you could do that. And they're advising me what my options are. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that. So the bottom line is I go to make the phone call to the boy to tell him what had happened. And instead of him answering the phone, it was his older brother. And his older brother, is now telling me, you know, what's your address? And like I said, I'm talking, like thinking I'm talking to the younger brother. Okay. And the next thing I know, it's like, what's your address? And I give it because I'm upset, and I'm not thinking, well, why would I give my address if he already knows where I live? But it wasn't him. It was his older brother, and their voices were so similar. So the bottom line is, next thing I know, the older brother is coming to my house, and he's, putting a ladder up to my window and climbing in the window. And again, like, I guess it's that whole Romeo and Juliet, oh, he's so romantic, whatever. But he climbs in my window, And he listens to me tell about how his brother, did this to me, and I'm so upset and I don't know what to do. And so he starts to comfort me and hug me and listen, and he's like, "Well, I'm a carpenter and I make this much money and I'll take care of you and I'll bring up the baby." And I'm just like, "What?" And so, like, here's this guy that raped me, and it was uncomfortable, and I have all these feelings about it, and I don't know what to do with all these feelings about it. And now I'm pregnant, and I'm in a dance school, and I have all these responsibilities for being in a dance school because I'm hand selected and chosen to stay in this dance school, but I can if I'm pregnant. And I'm like, I don't know what my choices are. And now this guy's saying, I'll marry you, I'll bring up the baby. And so what does he do? He does the comforting things of hugging, which then is like a totally different type of affection. And then it leads into sex again, but it's not like angry, mean, violent sex, which was my first experience, but it's loving, a totally different way it was handled. And again, I'm even more confused because it's like, you know, they're two brothers, and why is this happening to me? And this doesn't feel right. And, you know, and he's like, I want you to meet, my family, my sister, and she'll tell us what to do. And I'm just like, I feel like there's too much happening, and I don't know how I'm gonna respond. And I'm going to church and I'm praying and I'm asking for God's help. And I feel like, just, and then it's like that week to church, they're having all these, you know, um, picking, what do you call it? Picketing, with abortion and all the pictures. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like there's just so much that's being bombarded. And yet at the same time, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So eventually I finally tell my parents. And when I tell my parents, again, I'm under my parents' authority. And even though I myself was going, I'll have the baby, I'll just have to have the baby. Maybe I'll give the baby up for adoption, and then I'll resume with school the following year. And that's kind of what I had resolved to within myself. But my parents are like, "Oh no, you're not having the baby. You're not ruining our family name. You're not going to, we're not going to bring up this baby. This is a man that raped you. You're not going to want that association and that feeling for your life." And so again, I'm under my parents' authority, and then I'm, you know, taken off to the clinic to have an abortion. And that's not what I wanted, but that's what was mandated by my mom, basically. And my dad was more silent about it, but he allowed it to happen. And the next thing I know, I'm, you know, have all these guilt and remorse feelings, and I'm only 15 years old. So this is a lot to handle. It's not what I expected at all. And the emptiness, the heaviness of that decision was just so huge. And and I'm just like, I couldn't get into my studies. It was like I didn't want to dance. There's so much going on. And meanwhile, I couldn't tell anybody, any of my friends at school, because then they would mock me or judge me. And so it's like I had to keep all this inside, and it was really hard. And meanwhile, I don't trust guys now because this was my best friend that I really trusted that raped me. And then his brother, manipulated me. And even though he was saying he would marry me, it was like my parents wouldn't allow that to happen. So there's all this like back and forth, and, so it was very challenging time. So what I'm getting at is all of that had a lot to do with why then I was even further punished. And it's like, you're not allowed to date boys. You're not allowed to go out. You're not allowed to wear short skirts. You're not allowed. There's so many I'm not allowed to's. And so I just kind of was like, okay, and all I did was I put my energy into reading and studying and schoolwork, and, and dance, to the level that I could be motivated about dance. And then, the next thing I know, it's like that pattern, okay, of if the guy rapes you and the guy deceives you and you're pregnant, then the solution is you get an abortion. So then the next time I was engaged with someone and I thought that my life was going in a certain direction, and I had sex before marriage, so that was not the right thing. But again, I was like, I was engaged. I thought this person was, this is, during the late parts of college or whatever. And I'm thinking, I'm marrying this guy. And, so I made an assumption which was incorrect. And the bottom line is I got pregnant again. And again, I went to the guy and I told him, and I was like, this is, what happened. And he's like, well, I'm not going to be a father, and, you need to go get an abortion. And so the whole point is this whole idea of a pattern is set. And before you know it, like, you don't even, it's like you just kind of numb yourself to like, oh, well, okay, well, that's an option. So therefore, and it's not really a baby. It's not a full baby. It's just like a seed. It's like, the small speck of nothing right now. It's not a big baby, it's just flesh, and that's what they tell you when you're going to all this, consideration of having an abortion. That's what the clinics tell you. So the bottom line is that was not a good pattern to have. Okay. And as time went on, and now, like, years later, I'm an adult. Again, I'm engaged to a different person, and I'm making all these wedding plans. I'm planning a wedding, and the same thing happens again. And the guy's like, I don't want to be a father, not now, like later, but not now. So just get an abortion. So what I'm saying is the whole society was so for abortion that I just fell into the pattern. And my relationship with God each time was getting dwindled because I was disobeying God and I was moving further away from God. And even though I believed in God, even though I loved God, even though I believed in the Bible, it was like I was not honoring what God was saying to do and not do. And I wasn't really doing my research to really understand the Bible. In Catholic school, they only told you certain Bible stories, and that was it. It wasn't like they really wanted you to have a comprehensive understanding of the Bible. They just didn't. It was just not their way of teaching. So, bottom line is that I was an ill-informed student of the Bible, and I was acting in worldly ways that were costing me. And I had a lot of challenges. I was under a lot of curses, but I didn't understand that. And in addition to that, there were other generational family curses that I was under that, again, at the time I didn't understand. And those were in regards to my father's line and my mother's line, and alcoholism and drug addiction, and, you know, um, you know, just other things that were within the family, quote, secrets, or things that they didn't want to talk about, but they were there, but nobody was talking about them, and nobody was actually getting out of sin. They were continuing in sin. So the bottom line is they're just demonstrating that you can be in sin as long as you want, and you can love the world as much as you want. You can just do whatever you want to do, because that's what life is about, to have a good time and to, get what you want. And meanwhile, I'm looking at my mom, and my mom was very reserved. She was always, the woman of sacrifice. The woman was having an extra job or an extra two jobs to get us an extra pair of shoes. She was always sacrificing her own personal desires for the sake of the family. She was always, making sure that the house was clean and hospitable to have guests and family over. And she was willing to do whatever it took to maintain that. Whereas, my dad in the basement was like a junk pit, and, things just looked chaotic and out of order. And he was drinking and smoking and, partying a lot. And, his thing was, I'm going to go play pool, and I'm going to, sing in the choir, and I'm going to go get drunk after this with my buddies at, this bar. And, the whole point is when you're brought up in a family like that, you think that that's, quote, normal or that's, quote, functional. And if they're also telling you that they love God and they love Jesus, and yet they're still smoking cigarettes and they're still drinking alcohol, you're like, well, I guess that's okay, right? Now, again, for me, because of the destruction that I saw in terms of abuse and within my own family dynamic and extended family of, drunk drivers and just people that just didn't have their life together, I didn't want to participate in drinking. It was just not an interest to me at all. And I didn't want to participate in drugs either. It was just not an interest to me. So for the small short time where I was, quote, holding a cigarette in my hand, at a party or something, it was really to get people off my back to just keep asking me. So I just hold one, and then that would appear as though I was cool and participating, but I really wasn't. And that was like my temporary solution. But the bottom line was, I was not a smoker. I was not an addict. I was not a drinker. I was not an alcoholic. I was not a drug addict. I was just somebody that just wanted to live simply, and I couldn't understand why everybody else in the world and everybody else in my life was all about partying. And yes, I was the odd man out. I was a person that didn't want to participate. So normally, who was I? The designated driver, the person that's constantly going to be driving everybody to these parties or responsible for picking people up from these parties to bring them home. And so everybody wanted to be my friend because they wanted me to be the designated driver. But at the time, I didn't understand that. I just thought that, oh, they're my friends and we're going to go to the party and we're going to dance because I like to dance. But they wanted to get drunk. They wanted to do some, pill popping, they wanted to hook up with boys. And I'm like, I already know what that's got me. I don't want to do that. So again, there's this, you're like trying to be set apart and not in it, and yet set your boundaries. And at the same time, it's like there's so few people that are, quote, like you, that are saintly or, not wanting to fall into the world's problems. So you're trying to, find other people that are like you, but there really are not many people that are square, and it's just, there's not a lot. So, you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, I guess I'll have these people as my friends, even though I don't participate in these types of activities. And then the whole thing about, getting a tattoo or getting piercings or whatever. And it's like, I have my ears pierced, but that's it. I don't have any, other things of that nature. And even though I've attempted and tried, it was like, if I tried to do something, my nose would get infected and, the piercing would dry up, and I'd be like, that's not even worth it for me. So it was like, it's done, and the idea of a tattoo and being a permanent thing on my body, like, I just don't have that level of commitment. Like, it just doesn't work for me. So when other people were doing that in my life, I just couldn't understand it. I didn't understand why they wanted to mutilate their body. I didn't understand why they wanted to go through that pain. I didn't understand why they wanted to go against God. Like, they're making a blood covenant, and I didn't want to participate on that level at all. So I didn't participate. Like I said, there were times when people would just be riding my butt all the time about, I'm not part of the club and I'm too square. And you know what I do? I'd go to one of those machines, those gumball machines or whatever, and I buy one of those fake temporary press-on tattoos, like a sticker. And people would think that I had a tattoo. And that's what I did, And I know that sounds so stupid, but it was just, I was so sick of constantly being persecuted when all I wanted to do was have a friend that I could talk to and, go out dancing with or have a walk with or go camping with. And meanwhile, it was like everybody was always judging me that I didn't have a tattoo or I didn't drink. And so I would hold the bottle of alcohol in my hand and pretend that I was drinking, but I wasn't drinking. And I'm like spilling it on the ground, So I'm just saying, we do stupid things or things, instead of just standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to participate at all, but it took me time to be able to like have the courage to say that and to stand up against my friends and be like, no, I'm not getting a tattoo. If you want to get a tattoo, that's on you, but I'm not going to get one, and then if you want to drink, that's on you, but I'm not going to. And if you want to go out and have sex with these random people, that's on you, but I don't want to do that. And it doesn't mean that I haven't had temptations, because I have. And it doesn't mean that I haven't been put in uncomfortable situations, because I have. I've been sexually assaulted. I've been sexually abused. I've been physically abused. I've had abortions. I've made wrong decisions. Every time I was engaged to somebody, but nonetheless, I didn't marry any of those guys. None of them. None of those engagements ever came to a completion. So what I'm getting at is that with all the things that I've been through, I know that the best way is to be under Lord God's authority, to be submitted under Jesus, Yeshua's authority, to be submitted under the Holy Spirit's authority and guidance, and to be under the authority of your parents when they are in direct agreement, alignment under Lord God the Father, and under Jesus, Yeshua the Son, and under the Holy Spirit. And when they are not, for me to be a stand even against my parents that, no, I don't agree with you. No, I'm not going to do that. And that was harder to go against my parents when I knew that they were wrong and that I didn't agree with what they were doing. And I wish I would have had the courage at earlier points in my life, but I didn't. So what I'm getting at is now as an adult, I know that it's better to be under God's authority and under God's blessings and under Jesus's authority at the atonement of the cross, and to rely on Jesus's strength in me through the Holy Spirit to carry out my life, for me to be as, conscious as I can one day at a time, to be more like Jesus. That's my goal, and to be more saintly. And that means that people are not going to like me. They're going to think that, I'm goody two shoes and I'm too righteous and I'm too saintly. And okay, I'll take those criticisms or those titles. And I'm okay with it. It doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't hurt my feelings, but the bottom line is it's God over people for me. That's just what it's going to be. And right now, currently, there's a battle. There's spiritual battles going on. And some of my friends are really annoyed with me right now because, they want to post, they just want to live in the worldly lifestyle, and I don't. And so there's going to be conflict, and all I can do is pray that they will come to their senses and come under God's authority and direction. And if they do, great. And if they don't, I'm going to have to continue on the straight and narrow path, even if that disappoints them, even if that, disrupts our friendship. And even if that means that I have to consider them not my friend because they're not a friend of God. And really, it is about team God versus team devil. And if you really get it that simply, and understand it at that level, you'll start to make the choices and the stands that you need to make in your life in order to be with God and be obedient with God. So sorry for that rant. I hope that some of that made sense, and I will talk you through soon.